Just a brief background. I'll share a little bit about who I am and the Healthcare Innovations Special Interest Group now that we've covered housekeeping. And I'm Arthur Edge, Director for the Healthcare Innovations Special Interest Group. We are hosting this session in partnership with Pfizer, along with a number of other programs during the convention. One thing that's important to know about us in SIG is that we're very mission-driven, similar to the larger organization. And we execute our mission, which is really about developing innovations that attack the challenges that come up with diagnosis, treatment, of prevention of injury, illness, and disease. We attack that through what we call the care strategy. This particular program relates to a number of points in our care strategy, as you'll see. We'll be talking about how to connect you and build your network, but really focus on how you can advance in the field and also provide some opportunities for education and exposure. The SIG is not led alone. I am accompanied and have the pleasure to serve an awesome team. You'll have the opportunity to meet them and dialogue with them if you stop by our booth in the Career Fair and Expo. And this is the round out of the leadership team. All right, everyone, those are all of the housekeeping items. Now to the main event. Again, we're here for Pharma and the fight against COVID-19 and healthcare disparities. Our featured speaker and partner is Pfizer, and they'll really share a bit about how they're addressing healthcare disparities and advancing a potential COVID-19 vaccine candidate, which is a very important topic right now. And the key speakers in lineup order are Roberto Silveira. He's been at Pfizer since 1989. He is the president of technology and engineering and is in charge of global engineering, technical support, and contract manufacturing organizations, and leads technical support and a team of subject matter experts within the organization. We also have Paul Mensa, who's a vice president of bioprocess R&D and drug substance supply. He's been at Pfizer since 1999 and leads and supports their teams through their biotherapeutics and pharmaceutical sciences group. Then we'll hear from Mona, who's the global diversity and inclusion leader at Pfizer. She's been at the organization since 2007 and leads many of their strategies around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And last but not least, we'll hear from Melissa, who's the Senior Director of National Government Relations and Multicultural Affairs. So you know, with that title, she has a lot to share about the work that they're doing for regulatory, legislative, and public policy matters at Pfizer. She's been with the organization since 1998. So again, just remember, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat with the Q&A in front at any given time. And there'll be a point at the end where we'll have a poll where you will have the opportunity to win prizes. So please make sure to pay attention during the presentation, as there may be some nuggets there to help you be competitive. And we'll come back at the end for breakout sessions and more formal or informal dialogue and Q&A. Thank you, and with that, we will pass the mic to our first speaker, Roberto.
Hi, everybody. As we know, was introduced as the Vice President of Technology and Engineering, as Vice President, not President. Thanks for that, Arthur, but not President as yet. And basically, know Pfizer Global Supply. They know the manufacturing organization and external supply organization. I support the size that we have at Pfizer. Then I'm going to start talking about me. Next slide, please. And then this is about me. This is basically three pieces here. I'm from Brazil, and I really love going back. Unfortunately, these days it's not possible. I'm from São Paulo, but when I go back, usually I go to Rio. That's the first picture. And in the second picture, Bolsa in Rio, I like everything about Brazil, and I like picanhas and the churrascarias that probably you know about. And I do a lot of that at home as well. The second passion of mine, obviously, is my family. On the left side is me and my wife. Then is my extended family, with my nephew, my son, and my daughter. And it also includes my dog Mel. She's a big part of the family now. And the third passion is my hobbies and my sports. Then, as you can see on top, snowboard. I like a bit of extreme sports. There's snowboard, you have windsurfing, and on the right-hand side, you have me trying to wakeboard, which I'm becoming more successful these days, but not that good. In the middle, I did a lot of run in the past, but then my knees start complaining and talk to me all the time. I was doing the run, and my knee is still not smiling to me a lot. And usually I cannot run these days, but I still can do some of the other sports that I like so much to do. Next slide, please. Then I've been with Pfizer for a long time. I did my chemical engineering University of Sao Paulo. Then I did my PhD in Japan, in Hiroshima University, and I studied fermentation technology. Then I moved into Pfizer Brazil. And my career has been in Pfizer for a long, long time, as you heard, 89. Then I moved to Pfizer Brazil, where I run the drug product, the API facility in Brazil. Then in 94, I was invited to come to US for more a global position, managing fermentation technology that includes facilities in US, Brazil, and Japan. And then my career started expanding in a way. And then I became responsible for technology related to biologics, and that becomes a global position. I think if you click, has an animation on this slide, but I'm not sure. Can you just see if the animation, yes. Then usually when I talk about my career, I think you have very specific moments that were very important within the career. And basically by having been involved in biologics, I think was key for my growth. And a bit of lucky in a way, because I knew fermentation and Pfizer got involved in biologics. Then basically I was the right person at the right time, and that's what created the growth. Then after that, my position was growing, and I got into stereo injectables. And the last big Pfizer is my position now, where I have engineering and I have small molecule technologies as well. Then all the pharmaceutical piece, all the technologies associated how to produce pharmaceuticals now reporting into me. I want to mention something you have on the bottom right, which is the mentor-mentee program on the Latino CRG in Pfizer. And CRG stands for Colleague Resource Group. I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusion. And I think about 10 years ago, I actually led this mentor-mentee program for Latinos within Pfizer. I'm not doing it that anymore as leading the group, but I still have a lot of mentees on the Latino community within Pfizer, which I think is something that's really important. And when the group was created, it was very small, and then grow up on the 4 or 5 years that I was leading the group, and which I'm very passionate about it. The next slide, please. I want to finish with my responsibility now. It's about 864 colleagues in the technology pieces that I lead, as you see on the right-hand side, with 25 pilots and analytical labs. And my group is actually heavily PhDs and undergraduate people, but prior to COVID, a lot of the work we do can be done remotely, then all the tech transfer type of work, then in that sense, the presence in 18 countries. that's a bit about me. With that, I pass to Paul. He will talk about him.
Thank you, Roberto. By the way, Roberto and I will be going back and forth a little bit, and then we'll stabilize with Mona and Melissa at the end. So my name is Paul Mensah, and Roberto is on the manufacturing side of Pfizer, and I am on the research side of Pfizer. So I lead the Bioprocess Research and Development Group. Next slide, please. So I was born in Ghana, on the western coast of Africa, and I came to the States at the age of 14. And I lived in the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx. I went to high school in the Bronx. My whole family lived there. After high school, I went to Ithaca, to Cornell University, where I majored in chemical engineering. At Cornell, I was an active member of NSBE, and so I am glad to be interacting with NSBE now. And I actually said the first conference I ever attended was a NSBE conference in St. Louis. So I'm glad that Pfizer is again connecting with NSBE, and I look forward to participating in many meetings going forward. After my bachelor's degree from Cornell, I went on to, I can't see myself anyway. I went on to Charlottesville, Virginia, at the University of Virginia, where I completed my PhD in chemical engineering. And from there onwards, my career at Pfizer began. I started off in Groton, Connecticut, and it was at a time where Pfizer was just now getting into the biologic space. We were the company of Viagra and Lipitor in those 1990s, and we were trying to make a transition as well to the biologics aspect. In 2003, Pfizer acquired Pharmacia, and with that, I was moved to St. Louis. Now, when you grow up on the East Coast and perhaps even on the West Coast, you never imagine ever moving to the middle. But I have to say that St. Louis has been good to me. It's where I met my wife, and it's where my family is settled right now. And so you never know where opportunities come. And so be open-minded, even if you haven't been at a place like that before. Next slide, please. So a bit about me and my family. I am married to Shirley, who is a federal magistrate judge, and so at home she's legal engineer. So we have some interesting conversations at home. Obviously, most of the time she's the one talking about all her cases, and I just listen. I've learned to do that. We have two beautiful girls. Olivia is my older one, and my younger one. I don't know. There's something about the younger ones. They're always the crazy one, and don't be surprised if she pops in here anytime. Because of COVID, I'm working from home, and she could pop in anytime. Whatever she wants at any moment is the most important thing in the world. So luckily, I think she's still sleeping. The picture on the right was actually my family got to go to Ghana for the first time this past Christmas in December, and this is them wearing the kente cloth, which is the traditional Ghanaian. Then I'm glad we got it in before COVID-19, and so they were there for the first time and really enjoyed it. Outside of work, normally I'm a soccer player, but as I've gotten older, like Roberto, my knees have given up, so I've shifted to golf. And this was a picture of me that was taken after I made my first and only hole-in-one. And for those who play golf, it's hard to do. And so I've done it. I hope I'll make it one more time in my career, but we'll see. I'll cherish this one until I get another one. Unfortunately, right after this hole, I hit the ball, the same ball that went into the hole, I hit it in the woods. So it wasn't my lucky ball after all. So that's really a bit about me. And now I'll shift a little bit and talk about Pfizer. Next slide. So Pfizer, who we are and what we do. Next slide, please. Our purpose at Pfizer is really to develop breakthrough medicines that change patients' lives. Breakthrough medicines that change patients' lives. Patients are at the core of everything that we do. We recognize that at any moment, any of us can be a patient. It could be me, it could be my mother, it could be my sister. And so we hope that if they get there, we hope they never get there, but if they are sick, that some of our medicines that we are making could impact them and hopefully cure them or make them feel better. That's the core of what we do. That's our purpose. Next slide, please. We define our success in large part by the patients that benefit from our medicines. Okay. Our success is defined by the impact we have on humanity. And we do have huge impact on humanity. In 2019, for example, 69 million people were immunized by our vaccines. I'm sure many of you at one time or the other have received our vaccines. Prevnar is one such example. Okay. Over 84 million people benefited from our cardiovascular and metabolic disease. And 4,700 people with rare diseases also benefited from our medicines. Our impact in 2019 was over 300 million people. It's a noble job. We make medicines that change patients' lives. And that's a huge motivation for all of us. Next slide, please. So we are a global company with over 88,000 people worldwide. Manufacturing is in 42 countries. And so for a career, if you are like Roberto, you could move from country to country, or if you're like me, you will spend all your career in the US or wherever you want. But we sell our products in over 125 countries, and we have a revenue in 2019 of about $52 billion. Next slide, please. Research and development is really the core of our success. The foundation of our work comes in the research and development group. And we have focused our resources in the area that we believe gives us the best chance of scientific success. In oncology, internal medicine, vaccines, and you will hear in a few minutes some of the work that we are doing on the COVID-19 vaccine, inflammation and immunology, and in rare diseases. Rare diseases is particularly a big part for me in a way because my older sister passed away from sickle cell disease, and I have a niece who has sickle cell disease. And I know that we have programs within Pfizer for sickle cell. And so hopefully someday those will be successful and someone like my niece could benefit from it. So rare disease is really a special part of the work that I do, and I am motivated by all the work that we have going on in there. So that's the research part, and I'll shift now back to Roberto to talk a bit about the manufacturing part, and then I'll come back and talk a bit about our work on the COVID vaccine. So Roberto, go up.
Okay, next slide, please. No, I think it's still yours, Paul.
That's what happens when you looked at it. Just one more slide on our pipeline. Okay, we have a really strong and robust pipeline, and it is a really well-balanced pipeline. Currently in development, we have 27 programs in phase 1, 37 in phase 2, and 21 in phase 3, with 6 in registration. And because of the depth of our science, I am hopeful that many of these products will eventually make it to patients. So sorry about that. Roberto, I think you are up next.
Yeah, before I talk about the slides, I had a chance to visit Paul in his place in St. Louis. His younger daughter is absolutely fantastic. She fits into what I like most. Paul went to play golf after soccer. I went to snowboard and windsurf, and she's more of my style than yours, Paul, just to mention that. Anyway, back to what is serious here. Here we're talking about the manufacturing capabilities, and why me and Paul are talking about Pfizer capabilities, that when we're going to talk about COVID-19 vaccine, all those capabilities what allow us to develop the COVID vaccine fast and have a strategy to supply. Then, as you can see in the manufacturing space, we have 42 sites, but we have also 200 suppliers as well that support us manufacturing ourselves or they manufacture for Pfizer. Obviously, quality is the most important piece because when we deliver product to patients, have all of them being with quality, then even our contract manufacturers, we have to work close to them to ensure quality. Then 28,000 colleagues, 23 billion doses of medication per year. Then I want to just stop here. Then if you think about technology, and as Paul said, we are passionate about working for a pharmaceutical company that deliver medicines to patients, but I'm very passionate about technology as well. And just talking about technologies, out of these 23 billion doses, you have basically 3 technologies that we supply products. One is biologics and vaccines, and all of them are sterile injectable products. The second one will be small molecules, which is more the tablets and pills. And the last one will be sterile injectables that you take. Then all those 3 technologies are part of this 23 billion doses, and 1.5 billion will be sterile injectable units. On the biologics and vaccines, and why we put that as a special place is because for the COVID-19 vaccine development, the biologics and vaccines is the type of expertise that's necessary for us to deliver. And we have 500 million doses of those, and Prevnar that Paul mentioned is one very important vaccine that we deliver. Next slide, please. I'm going to be really quick in this slide, but vaccine is not new to Pfizer. And one of the companies we acquired about 15 years ago, and I'm guessing I don't know exactly how long ago, Wyeth, started in the vaccine space very early, 1906 with diphtheria, and then continue growing to different vaccines. And I think in year 2000 was groundbreaking to have this first conjugated vaccine, pneumococcal vaccine, launched. And that vaccine, which was a 7-valent, usually for different strains and go after different strains, now in 2010 is a 13-valent vaccine for pneumococcal, and probably every kid in US take this vaccine when they were born. With that, next slide, please. Now getting a bit more close to the COVID space, for in case of Pfizer global supply, when we're talking about the vaccines, we have 1,500 colleagues focused on vaccines. We have 6 vaccines in our portfolio. I'm going to talk more a bit about the technology for them later in the presentation. And Paul and his team are working on 7 projects in clinical development right now. I think that excludes COVID, but I'm not sure. It's either 7 or 8 if you include COVID in a way. One last slide, next slide, please, is something that we're very proud of. Then I put that slide in the presentation. When the whole COVID start happening, then we had to well, we supply medicines to patients, and one very important thing is that we have to continue to supply medicine to patients, but at the same time, we have responsibility over our employees to protect them against COVID. Then it's kind of what the balance of being able to supply medicines, but find a way to produce those medicines in the safest way as possible. Then very early, and I think that was put together in March, or even, early March, we create what we call a facility pandemic preparedness plan, which basically modified the way we manufacture in a way that we continue to supply products, but the same token we protect our employees. But obviously, number one was everybody that could work remotely start working remotely. And I'm the case that starting in March, I've been working from home. And I'm guessing a number here, but probably 60% of our colleagues in manufacturing still going to the manufacturing sites. But we adhere to the local governments and health authorities. That's the must piece. So obviously, only on-site essential people are going there. But then we create, as you see the cafeteria now, we create the 6 feet distance between people to ensure safety. Everybody wearing masks. And we have several protocols implemented of washing hands and not being in contact with other people. Then I'm happy to say that we didn't have from March to now any disruptive or substantial disruptive of production. Actually, no disruptive production during that time period because we act very early and we create a plan that enable us to supply medicines to patients. And actually, on top of that, we're going to talk more, enable us to do the amazing work that we are doing to develop the COVID vaccine. I think the next one is on you, Paul, but yeah.
Okay, thanks, Roberto. So yeah, I'm sure, we thought that since COVID is on everybody's mind, that, perhaps sharing some of the efforts that we have going on in Pfizer would be helpful because we have been at the forefront of this and hopefully we will be the first to come up with something. So Pfizer's really response to this COVID crisis has really been robust and very comprehensive. Okay, we did significant work in the antiviral space. And in fact, within the next few weeks, we expect to start a clinical trial with our antiviral. In addition, just recently, we signed a deal with Gilead Sciences to manufacture their antiviral, which is the only approved product right now for COVID-19, remdesivir. And part of the purpose, our comprehensive strategy that our CEO says is that our biggest competitor, our enemy, is the virus. And so we are reaching across companies to help whoever has something that works, to help come up and mass produce it so people who need it can have it. And that was part of our motivation to really work with Gilead to produce more of the remdesivir for patients. We've also done significant exploratory work with some of our own portfolio projects, some approved, some in our pipeline, mostly in the inflammation area, to help with curing patients, and many of those are still in clinical trials. The area that we really want to focus on today is on the vaccine. And it is one that I have personally been really involved in, and there are a number of people working hard, long days, long night, to make it happen, because we know that humanity needs it. The only way we get back to normalcy in any way is with the vaccine. And as a pharma company, we couldn't sit around and do nothing. And so it's been a huge effort, unprecedented investment in this area to try to come up with a vaccine that could hopefully benefit society. Next slide, please. So I thought maybe I'd describe a bit of what work is going on in the vaccine field and what other companies are doing. But first, I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is a 3D model of the COVID vaccine. And the red spikes coming out of it are called the spike protein. And for the vaccine to get into our cells, the spike protein is really the key, right, to opening the door into our cells. And so a number of the vaccine candidates that are targeting COVID-19 are focused on this spike protein. Some are targeting the receptor binding domain, which is on the top side of it, and others are targeting the whole spike protein. And yet there are others that are also targeting the whole vaccine. So there are various technologies in development, one that's based on recombinant vectors, one that's essentially taking the protein, making the spike protein as the antigen. Others will take the DNA of the spike protein, right, and use that to produce the antigen in vivo. Yet others are doing what we call inactivated virus, which in essence, they actually grow the virus itself, inactivate it, so it's not effective, it's not infectious, but yet it can elicit immune response. An area that we are focused on is in the mRNA vaccines. And that also, in a way, starts from the genetic sequence of the spike protein. Next slide, please. So Pfizer and BioNTech, which is a small company in Germany, really partnered to accelerate the development of what we believe has the potential to be the best in class and the first in class COVID-19 mRNA vaccine. And BioNTech comes to the partnership with significant expertise in mRNA, and they may arguably have the most diversified mRNA in the industry. They've also developed a vehicle for the mRNA, which is called lipid nanoparticles. And so the lipid nanoparticles are really the carrier for the mRNA. And they have a small GMP facility in their shop in Germany. Pfizer brings to the partnership strong leadership in infectious disease vaccine research and development. And we have extensive experience in carrying out large clinical trials with a track record of success. We have one of the largest manufacturers of vaccines and therapeutics in the world. And within our development group, we have state-of-the-art capabilities in pilot plant, in drug product development, as well as in analytical development. And so bringing these two expertise together, we are in a position where we can accelerate this important product to society. Next slide, please. So a bit about mRNA vaccines. So we start first with getting the DNA of the spike protein. That's our antigen. This DNA, we do what we call a cell-free synthesis and transcribe the DNA into mRNA. The mRNA is then packaged really into lipid nanoparticles, and that becomes the carrier. And that's what we inject a patient with. Once it is in the body, the mRNA will then go through the protein synthesis sequences to make the spike protein. The spike protein is then presented on the surface of our cells, and our body's immune response reacts to it to form antibodies, as well as T cell response to it. So in essence, we are using the body to make the protein, and the body's immune system then reacts to it to form the antibodies and the T cell. Between Pfizer and BioNTech, we had 4 programs in development, and just recently, we settled on the lead candidate. Next slide, please. So the development of this vaccine is unprecedented by all measures. The time that it's taking for us to get to where we are and the resources and investment that we have put in to be able to get to where we are has been highly significant. And we've done this going through all the right processes of drug development. This is just a picture of the timeline of the development of this vaccine. In January 12 in China, the sequence of the SARS-CoV-2 virus was done. In March 11th, 2020 of this year, BioNTech started animal studies with their mRNA vaccines. Just a week after that, Pfizer and BioNTech, which had already been in partnership working on mRNA vaccines for flu, signed an agreement to work together on this COVID vaccine. In April, the phase 1/2 trial started in Germany, and in May, the phase 1 started in the US. We dosed up to 360 patients in the US and 200 patients in Europe. The goal for the phase 1 study, primary goal, is safety, and secondary endpoints are on the efficacy end. Based on the phase 1 and 2 data of our 3 candidates, we chose a lead in July 24th of this year. And just 3 days after that, we were able to initiate phase 2B 3 trials, which is currently ongoing on. Now, we are doing this in conjunction with regulators because typically when you submit a package, for example, at the end of a phase 2 study, it takes regulators months to review it and give you feedback. Knowing the urgency of this pandemic. Oh, are we hearing? Okay. Am I good? There was some music that came through.
You are
All right.
both.
All right. So knowing the urgency of this pandemic, the FDA is working with all companies to ensure that the reviews are prompt and timely. And so we're able to start our phase 3 trials in July of this year, July 27th, and the plan is to dose up to 30,000 patients. This is a global study. As of yesterday, we had dosed already 9,000 patients. If all goes according to plan, we hope to have interim readout of the vaccine in October, which will cover mostly efficacy but safety as well. And hopefully in conjunction with the FDA, if all goes well, we hope to have approval sometime in the 4th quarter of this year. The time frame here is unprecedented, but it wasn't done. Next slide, please. It was done with really taking significant risk, huge investment. Pfizer, as many of you may know, hasn't gotten any money from the government for our work. We spent our own money at risk in this investment. And the only way we could accelerate this work is really, in essence, put everything at risk and do everything in a parallel way. So everything is going in parallel. For a traditional vaccine, for example, you will not invest in manufacturing until you have proof that this is going to work. With this situation, we in essence assume that it's going to work, but it may not work. That's the nature of drug development. And we've invested upfront in a significant way. So we know the urgency of this thing, but we know that patient for safety and high quality is critical. And so we've really invested significantly such that we don't cut any corners. Okay, to make this thing work, we have to maintain and preserve the highest quality and safety standards. Okay, we've also, because of our large size, we have an end-to-end integrated capabilities from research to distribution, one of the largest global manufacturing networks for biologics and sterile injectables, which are all critical to get this going. Without them, BioNTech by itself could not do this, and Pfizer's strength and capabilities in this thing is what we bring to the table. Our goal, our hope, if all goes well, is that by the end of 2021, we would produce at least 1.2 billion doses for humanity. We need it. My kids need it. My kids start school next week. Who knows what will happen? We need it. And just the passion and the commitment of the whole Pfizer team each and every day to really make sure that we get this product to patients has just been amazing. That's why we do what we do. We have an impact on society, and there's no better way to do that than through this COVID vaccine. So I think that's the end of my slide. I'll shift back to you, Roberto.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, then Paul already mentioned that. I'm going to go a bit fast, but all those technologies that Paul mentioned, inactivated vaccines, proteins, we have the experience with Pfizer, and we have products. But all require different processes, and all the 3 processes here is egg processing type of vaccine. Usually flu vaccine is using eggs, and we have one FSME, is one vaccine you produce in Europe for Europe, and we have the technology of eggs for that. We have microbial cell technology for the chemical engineers. You can use E. coli type of microbials, and it's conjugated with polysaccharides. And this is we have that technology as well for Prevnar. And the third one, we have a vaccine in development that we're going to use mammalian cell technology, which is similar to monoclonal antibodies. And basically, that experience we have in the company of producing vaccines, The technology that Paul just described is mRNA, is new. It's not part of those standard process that we have for vaccines, but as we can see up to now, is going really well. Interesting enough, the technology associated to mRNA production is very similar to gene therapy, and we do have also capabilities in gene therapy, and that experience has been really valuable for us to be able to produce. Next slide, please. I think Paul mentioned a bit about the risk that we took to be able to be prepared for the $1.2 billion by the end of 2021. And actually, a large and substantial investment was made before we even know the results of phase 1 clinical trial. Then things like, I would just summarize these bullets into 3 bullets. One is to prepare the people to be able to produce. That was a huge, who are the folks that we're going to bring it and bring to other pieces of the organization to be able to develop the COVID vaccine. That's what was a major undertaking. A second piece was, how are we going to free capacity to produce 1.2 billion vaccines? And then that's divided in 2 approaches. One, it was to obviously make investments, but to try to deliver vaccine early, because a lot of it's stockpiling of products that we did to enable them to free up some capacity to produce the COVID vaccine. Then I think the third big piece, and I mentioned 3, was you have to order a lot of raw materials in advance of knowing you have a product or not, including the vials. I mean, if you're going to produce 1.3 billion doses, you're going to have loads of vials to enable you to produce that much, and you have to order in advance to be able to have it, and all the raw materials associated to the lipid nanoparticles and the production of DNA and all those excipients. Then a lot of risks on ordering raw material in advance, a lot of risk on actually ordering equipment and capital investment to our sites, and obviously a lot of risk on moving people around that could impact the manufacturing of other products, but fortunately that didn't take place. Next slide, please. Okay, then I think that it started in March. We had to define within our network where we're going to produce what, and we decided for 2 supply chains, and 1 supply chain in Europe, 1 supply chain in US. Then Andover in Massachusetts was where we're going to produce the drug substance, the mRNA, that will go for drug product production, which is basically the filling of the vials and the formulation that you're going to fill the vials with. That will be in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Pours, Belgium for the European supply chain. The finished package, also Kalamazoo and Belgium, and the release labs will be Chesterfield, Andover, and actually we have some release coming out of our facility in Grange Castle. That is all the analytical method required to release products. Then basically we have all of that in place to supply the 1.2 billion doses that Paul just mentioned, and obviously the US and the European supply chains to produce worldwide. It is not only for US and Europe. Next slide, please. I think that's an interesting slide. One of the important characteristics of these specific RNA vaccines and most of the RNA vaccines is they're very unstable and that has to be kept at a very low temperature. Then for that, we create a cold chain or a freeze chain because the vaccine has to be kept at -70. Then we produce a 2 ml multi-dose vial. We put those on trays that we call pizza boxes because it looks like a pizza box. We put that in a freezer, and then when we ship, we put 5 pizza boxes inside of a box with dry ice to be able to maintain at -70 plus -10, and that you ship to countries and where they use the vaccine, they thaw it, and they reconstitute, they use the vaccine. Then to just create this supply chain was an amazing work from a lot of people in Pfizer. Then I just want to show that is fantastic technology taking place for that. Then my last slide, and I pass the ball to other folks. Next slide, please. Is a bold move. We're gonna get 1 million doses in 2020 if we got regulatory approval, and obviously it's still the technology has to work, and we're very positive about that with the work from manufacturing and research. We need to produce 100 million doses in 2021, and that's very bold. Then Paul said how proud we are to be able to be part of this development. I would not call I'm proud, I'm privileged to be part of this development. It's a privilege to be able to be part of it. I'm thankful that I'm involved. It's kind of a bit different. It's so cool to know that I'm part of it. And if you think about it, I have work-wise 2 passions. And one is to produce medicines. I think is a passion. I think is a noble cause. But the second thing is technology. Very passionate about technology. I'm pretty sure Paul shared with me those 2 passions. Then again, I'm privileged to be able to do what I like, which is to work on technology. Where I like is to produce medicines. Now on top of it, the cherry on that, be able to do something that really impacts humanity in a way. Then I hope that motivates a lot of you to see how cool it is to work for a pharmaceutical company, and even coming from 2 different organizations, how close me and Paul are to try to work together and make this happen. With that, I pass to, I think, Mona, you're next to talk about all the work we do on diversity and inclusion. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roberto and Paul, for taking us through our vaccine, our COVID reaction to creating the vaccine. So I'm Mona Babari. It's an absolute honor to be on this panel speaking to you all virtually today. I am the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lead at Pfizer, responsible for the Pfizer Global Supply and Finance Business Operations Organization, a group of about 30,000 colleagues. Just a reminder, stay with us until the end of the presentation for a chance to win a 60-minute meeting with a leader at Pfizer. We'll be selecting 5 winners. Next slide, please. So before we jump into Pfizer's commitment to D&I, I wanted to share a little bit about myself. I'm Egyptian American, first in my family to be born in the US. I have dual citizenship, and I feel like I have 2 countries I can call home. Up in the top left corner is my Islamic religious marriage ceremony to my Afghan husband. On the bottom left, that's me and my husband on quads in the Sahara Desert. I am a food lover, particularly seafood. I'm a mother of 2, a 7-year-old boy who aspires to be an NBA player, and a 1-year-old golden doodle who aspires to eat pizza every day. In the top right are a few of my family members in Egypt. On the bottom right are who I call my chosen sisters of over 20 years. Let me take you on my career journey next. So I've been with Pfizer for about 13 years now, and I have quite a diverse journey. I graduated in 2006 with a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration and HR Management. I didn't have the opportunity to intern at a company. I had to pay my way through school, working 40 hours a week while taking 18 credits a semester. So upon graduating, I stayed with the Division of Taxation for about another year before I moved to Wyeth, where I took the role as an administrative assistant. I think back to that moment when the hiring manager said, "You have your degree, you have work experience. Why would you take this role?" and I was at the end of an exhaustive search, and not having an internship made it more difficult to get into entry-level fields in pharma or business or IT. So I'm thankful for that moment. I remember telling him, give me the opportunity, I'll do the admin work, I'll do the projects, and so I did. And I automated the first solution for tracking our counterfeit drug cases at Wyeth. A few years later, I was promoted to project analyst, leading project management initiatives for our $60 million serialization program called Track and Trace. This was the first program I ever got to manage, and it was one of the most complicated and interesting. All of the dependencies getting to work with engineers, supply chain, legal, marketing, the site leaders around the world, and quality gave me my first truly global experience. After the Pfizer Wyeth acquisition, the same manager that brought me into Wyeth helped me with my resume, coached me, and sent my resume to all of the VPs he knew. I was offered a position with the new global supply chain organization supporting our colleague development capability across 65 markets. Market transformation was an exciting program, one of my favorite parts of my career at Pfizer. And I was taking on designing and launching a virtual platform for our colleagues to access our streamlined supply chain processes across our entire network. I was promoted to the Global Operations Excellence Lead, and the next 5 years were a journey of developing market capabilities to best in class. So I got to experience a change in culture, strategy, process, and most importantly, develop a very close network of colleagues I call friends across the world. I began to pursue my next challenge. My next position was in business technology organization. I began by learning how to manage an IT portfolio. A few months in, I understand the financial processes, and I took on the opportunity to deliver the simplification and automation of our capital portfolio process across the entire technology organization. In parallel, I brought into New Jersey a program called Business Technology for Girls, a program designed to bring middle and high school girls into Pfizer for the day to teach them about careers in STEM and challenge some of those biases they have encountered about entering STEM as young as middle school. This became my passion and the part of the work that I enjoyed the most. So naturally, when the D&I lead was listed, I spoke to my manager and I spoke to my sponsor, and she connected me with the hiring manager for a conversation. I designed a plan. I went into the interview selling every skill I had in that plan, and I ended with the sell. This is what I want to do. When can I get started? So a few weeks later, I was offered the position. It took me 10 years at Pfizer to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I loved every position and every experience I had. And it took me 11 years to prepare for this role, understanding the different businesses, understanding the culture, the colleagues. And now I'm truly in a place where I feel my work is not a job. I tell my son every day I go to work to change the world, and I truly believe that. Next slide, please. Our purpose at Pfizer is clear: achieving breakthroughs that change patients' lives. We realize that means not just attracting the best and brightest talent, but also ensuring our colleagues can thrive in an environment and culture where we champion D&I every day around the world. At Pfizer, we have a purpose blueprint. We want to unleash the power of our people, deliver first-in-class science, transform our go-to-market model, win in the digital race in pharma, and lead the conversation. D&I is embedded in all of the bold moves. Where it is anchored is making Pfizer an amazing workplace for all. And where it comes alive in our 4 values is our value of equity. For our company, equity means that every colleague deserves to be seen, heard, and cared for. And we do that by being inclusive, acting with integrity, and reducing healthcare disparities. Next slide, please. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy has 4 pillars. The patients pillar focuses our efforts on closing healthcare disparities in diverse communities across the world. We want all patients to have equal access to healthcare and accessible and affordable drugs. A little later in the presentation, my colleague Melissa Bishop Murphy will be telling us more about what Pfizer is doing to address healthcare disparities in communities of color. The colleagues pillar is the pillar that I'm aligned to. Our D&I leads around the world partner with the business leaders to build strategies that make us a sought-after destination for diverse talent globally. By ensuring that D&I is not something separate, it's embraced in all aspects of our business. We are increasing representation, inclusion, and engagement of our talent. The communities pillar is where we support policies that promote fairness, equality, and respect for people. And finally, in our partners pillar, we are committed to working with suppliers and vendors who share our D&I values. Partnerships like NSBE, the Human Rights Campaign, Catalyst, Disability In, SWE, Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and HBCU Connect, just to name a few. Our supplier diversity organization is dedicated to working with a minority and female-owned businesses. We provide scholarships for diverse businesses to attend leadership and mentorship programs. Over the past 5 years alone, Pfizer has spent $3.5 billion with certified minority women-owned businesses, partnering with over 1,000 suppliers. Our inspiration is to be as diverse as the patients and communities we serve. Our aspiration is that we are all accountable to make D&I a part of our DNA and unlock its power to serve patients. Next slide, please. So we are living our value of equity. Over the next few slides, I'll show you how. Next slide. Around the world, the toll of COVID-19 and social injustice has impacted people of color disproportionately. People have come together raising their voices against racism, injustice, and inequality suffered by Black and African Americans. The killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor have led to global protests and highlighted the systematic racism not only in the US, but in areas around the world. I've seen the Black Lives Matter protests highlighted in Belgium, Netherlands, China, some of the largest in Germany, Australia, London, Egypt, amongst other countries. And while it has dominated the news cycle these past few weeks, we know it's foundational in history and it affects all of us. Our leadership was quick to listen and quick to act. Next slide. Our new and expanded commitments to equity include specific actions to foster a more inclusive environment within our company. We revised our 2025 opportunity parity goal for U.S. minority VPs, vice presidents, making the commitment to increase our representation from 19% to 32% by 2025, and doubling the representation of African American Black talent and Hispanic or Latino talent. We're requiring our D&I training for our executive leadership team and every colleague in the organization. We recently directed more than $3 million to communities of color suffering disproportionately from healthcare disparities and towards social justice work. We rolled out a new program to foster courageous conversations about race, about gender, about differences among teams. We're taking on the responsibility to address workplace inequities around the world. We believe that we have an opportunity to impact healthcare disparities in underrepresented populations through our clinical trials. We've revised our political action committee bylaws to ensure that recipients consistently demonstrate behaviors that align with our values. And we recognize that improving diversity of our interns is important, but it's even more important to bring those interns into Pfizer as full-time colleagues. As our CEO, Albert Bourla, stated, while it's important that we listen, it's even more important to act. And these are just some of the actions we're taking as a company. Next slide, please. Our site-based colleague resource groups help drive inclusion and professional development at Pfizer. CRGs are groups of colleagues that are part of or believe in the goals of a diverse population. Roberta, you mentioned you're part of the Latino CRG. And we are open to anyone who wants to join. So these groups provide a forum through which we can collectively deliver on our bold move to make Pfizer an amazing workplace for all. All of the CRGs offer support, developmental opportunities, mentoring, and networking opportunities to help their members enhance their skills and advance their careers. Most recently, the global Black community has partnered with our executive leaders at Pfizer to develop the 6 commitments to action for African American and Black colleagues. One of those commitments is to equip leaders with messages and narratives on the impact of systematic racism on Black colleagues. We have had courageous conversations at our sites with our leadership teams, with our leaders at the sites, and recently at our Kalamazoo, Sanford, and Rocky Mount sites, after a conversation on race, leaders flew the Black Lives Matter flag in support of our GBC and commitment to fight social injustice and ensure equity for all. The picture on the bottom right is the flag flying at our Rocky Mount, North Carolina site. Commitment number 6 is to achieve equity in our clinical trials and address the underlying issues of healthcare disparities related to Black people, and to explain more about the commitments to addressing healthcare disparities in communities of color, I'm honored to introduce to you Melissa Bishop Murphy, Senior Director and Co-Chair of the Multicultural Center of Excellence.
Thank you, Mona. I am just thrilled to be a part of this discussion. As you can see, Pfizer has a robust program to make drugs that impact patients' lives. Next slide, please. So my career, I actually am a HBCU graduate. I actually graduated from Stillman College with a BA in English and a minor in law. So I have always wanted to be an attorney. And Georgetown was my first choice because at the time that I was in college in the late 80s, international law was very important, and a lot of things were going on. So I went to Georgetown University Law Center, which had the #1 international law program in the country. But during my first year in law school, unfortunately, my dad had kidney failure, renal failure, and that really changed the trajectory of my career. I realized that for those who are minorities, the healthcare system was very hard to navigate. And to have a disease like kidney failure was even more so. So I changed my focus from international law to healthcare law. And as such, when I graduated from law school, I actually went to work for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as a Special Assistant U.S. Attorney General. I didn't realize working for the government that, I was just a peon. I was at the bottom of the ladder. I felt like I couldn't make a difference at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And I was practicing in Georgia at the time. And at that time, the Georgia Medicaid agency had decided they would move to Medicaid managed care. And I really thought that managed care might be the answer for those, because managed care focuses in on primary care, making sure that everyone has a physician. And so I really thought that, that can make a difference, especially in the minority community, and wanted to be a part of that. So I applied to the Medicaid agency. They had a position open. And eventually I worked my way up to be general counsel of the organization, a $3.5 billion health insurance program for the age blind and disabled. So that was my dream job. I felt like I was making a difference. I was ensuring that people who couldn't afford to have access to healthcare, and then Pfizer came knocking. And I was heavily recruited to say, look, we are trying to make a difference as well, and we would love for you to join the team. Having gone to Georgetown, I had student loans, so I said, look, let me go to Pfizer for 5 years, and I'll come back to the agency, so let me pay off my student loans. But guess what? Pfizer turned out to be just a wonderful place to work. And 22 years later, I'm still at Pfizer, and I worked as a lobbyist for Pfizer on the federal and state level. I've been involved in a number of healthcare policy issues to make sure that there's access to healthcare. Having had a father who died because of renal failure, it just really emphasized to me more that we need to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to have access to affordable health care. So I've worked on the Affordable Care Act. I work on Medicare Part D to help get that passed. And Mona, you were talking about track and trace, and I didn't realize you were involved in track and trace. I worked in a number of states to get legislation passed around track and trace. So it came full circle, Mona. So I did not realize you were involved with that. Because health policy plays a very important role in what Paul does, what you heard Roberto in his job, as well as what Mona does, because there has to be policy to implement what we do. So whether it be the access to vaccines, who is able to administer the vaccines, all of that is done through legislation and policy. So that's the interconnectivity between what we all do. After having been with Pfizer a number of years, I realized that I needed a business to understand business better. So I went back to school and graduated from the University of Georgia's Terry College of Business in 2010. Again, my commit. Oh yes, go Dogs! I see the chat. Yeah, so we, being in the South, you guys, you have to understand that our football is very important to us. So I am committed to healthcare for all. That is the driving force. I know a number of people who are uninsured. They're working, but they don't have access to health insurance. So I ask you, as we go through my presentation, to think about how you can be an activist in making sure your friends, your family have access to health insurance so that they can have access to the medicines that they need. Next slide, please. So as Mona mentioned, Pfizer has been very engaged in the healthcare disparity space, and I actually co-lead our Multicultural Center of Excellence. We all know that health disparities in communities of color has been an intractable hurdle that I've been working on, frankly, for the last 22 years of my career. That we've seen others work on, like the National Medical Association, the National Black Nurses Association. We need all of you to engage around this issue. In fact, in 2015, the Congressional Black Caucus issued a report called the Kelly Report to come up with how can we address as a nation this issue of healthcare disparities. And they came up with 5 key areas. One is access. And I'll talk a little bit more to you about how Pfizer is involved in access. The second is workforce diversity. The third is innovation and research. The fourth is community engagement. And finally, federal action, i.e. Passage of legislation. Next slide, please. So what is Pfizer doing in this space? Frankly, the industry is hard pressed and challenged because people are hesitant to partner with the pharma industry. So what we've tried to do to ease those concerns is to be absolutely transparent, not only in our COVID-19 clinical trials, but throughout the work that we do. As you saw from Mona and Paul's and Roberto's slide, we are doing a lot that can benefit the multicultural community, and we want people to know about that. How do we let people know about that? We do that through collaborations and partnerships, just like we're doing today with NSBE. And so I'm really thrilled that we're able to come to you and share the work that we're doing, and hopefully you'll share that information, get that out to your friends and family so that they understand that pharma is a partner with them as opposed to something other than that. The way that we do it internally to make sure that our partnerships or collaborations are spread across the Pfizer enterprise is through our Multicultural Center of Excellence. Next slide, please. So what is the Pfizer Multicultural Center of Excellence? We focus on helping to improve health equity across ethnic groups and other underrepresented communities facing health disparities. We do that through 4 pillars. They are advocacy and access, healthcare delivery systems, diversity in clinical trials, and disease management. So advocacy and access, you heard me talk about that. I've worked on the Affordable Care Act and the Medicare Part D. All of those pieces of legislation enable people who can't afford it to have access to care, whether it be through a government-run program, whether it be through a program like Pfizer's drug donation program called Pfizer Arts Pathways. Advocacy and access is the key to reducing healthcare disparities. We also do that through partnering through healthcare delivery systems. People get their healthcare through healthcare delivery systems, whether it be through their private insurance that pays for the healthcare, or through Medicare and Medicaid, which are government-run programs. And so we want to make sure that the minority community, the people of color, understand that there are ways to get coverage, whether it be through the ACA or through other means. In addition to that, we want to make sure that there are breakthroughs in science that eliminate barriers. And so we want to make sure that our clinical trials are diverse, so that any drug that is discovered, that it works in people of color. And finally, we focus on disease awareness. In particular, we focus in on the diseases that Paul mentioned earlier, regarding internal medicine, rare diseases, inflammation and inflammatory, cancer, and vaccines. Next slide, please. So what are some examples that the Multicultural Center of Excellence has done? We recently gave out to multicultural groups 18 charitable grants around COVID relief. In addition to that, we partnered with the National Urban League, the Anthem, and the City of Hope to create what we call the Take Action for Health e-toolkit to address healthcare disparities. We're also very active in the Latino community through Dia de la Mujer Latina. And finally, we work with what we call organized medicine, and that's the National Medical Association and National Black Nurses Association, to increase awareness around diversity in clinical trials. We have partnered a lot with over 40 different multicultural organizations, and we can continue to grow those partnerships. So if you have a group that's interested in working on healthcare disparities, I ask that you reach out to me. You see my email address down below, or my co-chair of the Multicultural Center of Excellence, Naisha Foster. Next page, please. So I can't be a lobbyist without talking about advocacy and action. One of the things that we are very certain of is that the African-American community does not trust Big Pharma. And there's reason for that. President Bill Clinton apologized for the Tuskegee experiment. So if any of you know anything, have been involved in clinical trials, you've heard, well, I don't want it to be Tuskegee. We recognize, as did President Clinton, that the men who were involved in those trials were lied to, that the experiment was an outrage, and as President Clinton said, he is deeply and profoundly and morally wrong. From the entire pharmaceutical industry, we owe African Americans a debt of gratitude for the sacrifices and contributions that they have made to the study, discovery, and advancement of medicine. So in the Kelly report, it said, again, that innovation and research has to be a key pillar to reduce healthcare disparities, and that we have to involve the community in reducing healthcare disparities. So as we think about and live with this distrust, we have to do a benefits analysis. We must have an attitude that having courageous conversations about the past has to be a part of our future. We need to have solutions and medications that work in African Americans, and we can do that by having those courageous conversations. Know that the ills of the past have changed, that there are safety and efficacy processes as part of the clinical trial process, and we want to be part of the solution. And we believe that you can be part of the solution in helping us to get information out about clinical trials. Next slide, please. So as we think about COVID-19, you see that the minority community has been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and that's due to healthcare disparities. African Americans already have a higher incidence of hypertension, cancer, our socioeconomic status also impacts our access to healthcare. So we are being disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 because of healthcare disparities. Next slide, please. As you heard from Paul and Roberta, we are doing a lot around COVID-19, but we need to have the peoples of color enroll in our COVID-19 trials. We cannot let the past injustices that have led to mistrust in the healthcare and clinical trial system impact our ability to have people of color enroll in clinical trials. So again, we are committed to transparency. We want to build collaboration and partnership with underrepresented communities so that there is the comfort level to have the discussions about participation in clinical trials. And know that Pfizer and others are able to accelerate the development process with the vaccine, but we're not cutting corners. I was really pleased that Paul shared with you all the steps that Pfizer has gone through to make sure that safety and efficacy is being built into the COVID-19 clinical trial. Next slide, please. So what's the call to action for you? You can be a patient advocate for your mom, your dad, your grandmother. And so as a patient advocate, arm yourself with information. We want you to be knowledgeable of why diversity in clinical trials lead to advancements in not only the COVID-19 vaccine, but also advances in other medications. And we want to enlist you if you feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable, we want to give you more information to make sure that diversity in clinical trials is a pillar of any successful clinical trial. And as a stakeholder, I consider all of us as stakeholders today that are on the call, we want to make certain that you understand the modern clinical trial process and how it works and what safeguards are built in to ensure that patient safety is at the forefront. We understand the distrust in the system, but we want you to know that the excesses of the past, serious as they have been addressed, and that we view those who volunteer for clinical trials as heroes of the biomedical progress. So we really need you to be an advocate for us and for you and for your grandmother, just as I was an advocate for my dad as he went through his journey of renal failure. So I ask you today, are you ready to be an advocate? Thank you. Mona?
Thank you very much, Melissa, for taking us through that. Again, be an advocate. There's so much to learn. We are not cutting corners with this vaccine. I'm seeing a lot of great questions coming through the Q&A. And so before we go into the Q&A, we have a game. We're going to test your knowledge, see if you were paying attention. The winners, the top 5 that are the quickest to respond and respond accurately, will win a 60-minute session with a Pfizer leader. Arthur, will you take us through the game?
Yes, thanks, Mona. Just want to do a quick confirmation that everyone can see the dashboard being live for the game. If you can just reply in the chat with a yes. Also, in case you have not joined the poll yet, the instructions to do so are also displayed on the screen. You can access the poll via vvox.app, and it will take you right in. As you add your name, do please add an alias where we can identify you as a leader at the end so that we can celebrate and connect you with leaders at Pfizer for the top people on the board. I'm just giving folks a few minutes because I can see how many people have joined the poll. All right, maybe a 10-second countdown. if anyone's having technical challenges, please just let us know in the chat so that I can give you about 10 seconds to join. And maybe if we can paste it in the chat for anyone who might be having trouble, they can click through. All right, this is the 10-second countdown. 5 seconds. All right, awesome. We're going to start the poll with the first question.
Thank you. Which of the Pfizer leaders who presented today is terrible at wakeboarding but has high hopes to master the sport soon?
Oh,
You're not on mute, Roberto.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
About to close the poll. Choose your final answers. Closing the poll now. Let's see how people responded. Oh.
Great.
Arthur, I see no one thought that that was my issue.
I influenced 18%.
Yes, it is Roberto. But now let's see who is on the leaderboard. Oh,
Okay.
okay. We'll see how that changes.
Yeah.
It's based off accuracy and fastest time.
Oh, okay.
All right, next question.
Yeah. Which of the following is Pfizer's purpose?
Wow, there's some fast fingers.
Yes.
Folks, make your final decisions and selections. 3 seconds, 2, 1. All right. Let's see what the results were. Majority got that right.
Yeah, breakthroughs that change patients' lives. Okay, George is still number one. Good job. Which of the following commitments did Pfizer announce? Achieving global workforce parity, 3 million in additional funds, all clinical trials recruitment demographics will match those of the countries where trials are taking place, or all of the above?
Give you the 5-second countdown. And closing the poll.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, everybody got that. That's great.
Nice job. What technology is Pfizer and BioNTech using for the COVID-19 vaccine development? DNA, an active virus, mRNA, protein?
5 seconds. About to close the poll. Let's see how the audience responded. Right, majority is correct.
mRNA.
And then our final question.
Approximately how many doses of COVID-19 vaccine do Pfizer and BioNTech plan to provide by the end of 2021, subject to regulatory approval? 100 million, less than 500 million, more than 1 billion?
Five seconds. About to close the poll. All right. Yes, I see that folks have been paying attention. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, let's see who our top 5 are.
Let's see here.
I shouldn't have been playing, so don't count me.
Yeah, so it's great that there's a 5 out of 5 here. So we will note down these names, take a quick screenshot so that we can stay in touch.
Very good. Thank you all for playing. I hope one of our values is joy at Pfizer, and the behavior is having fun. So these are some of the innovative virtual ways we like to have fun. So with that, let's move over into Q&A.
Awesome. So there have been a number of questions coming in through the chat. And we have a team working behind the scenes who've been helping us organize them and group them. And so we'll go with some of those from the chat first. And then actually there have been some members ahead of the conference who've submitted questions as well. So we'll go with those as additional questions if we get through all from the chat. But keep the questions coming in, and we will get to as many as possible. So the first question looked like it came in from, and forgive me if I butcher anyone's name, it's era of the mind and not the heart. But the first question's from Chaitanya. And she wants to know if Pfizer is exploring small molecules as a solution to COVID-19. And so you've talked a little bit about your partnerships with other peers in the industry. And then, related to the medicines being developed, how do you really sustain the supply chain for these essential vaccines after you're committing multiple production facilities?
Well, maybe I'll start with the small molecule, and we actually do have an antiviral program that we've finished all the preclinical work, and I expect that we'll be filing an IND soon, so we should be starting clinical trials on that within the next few weeks. So yes, I think our strategy has been quite comprehensive, and so that's been the approach, that we will have a small molecule, on the in clinical trial, and hopefully that will work as well. It's in the supply chain. Well, we don't really know how long these vaccines will last. And so the highest priority right now is assume everyone is going to need it. So for the next year or so, we are trying to make as much as possible. And, we want to exceed the 1 billion after that. Beyond that, as we understand, how sustainable it is, or how long this virus continues to be, I think we will model our approach accordingly. So I think, the capacity, if we can make 1 billion every year, it would be great. I'm not sure that we'll need 1 billion every year. And so we have to kind of wait to see how things work out first. But we do have the capacity to make 1 billion per year if needed.
Thank you. Perhaps a follow-up with another technology medicine focused question, combining two questions, one from Tier Riggins and one from Lauren who submitted. So what are the ways that Pfizer is increasing stability and bioavailability for the mRNA vaccine? And then also overall, how is Pfizer ensuring the quality of the products that are going to customers?
Roberto, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. I mean, as Paul just mentioned, obviously has a supply chain, a cold supply chain for the COVID vaccine today, but we are developing a second generation formulation for the future. As Paul said many times, and I mentioned as well, speed is what been driving us for this first generation vaccine. And that's why we have the cold chain, but we are looking at lyoformulation and things like that for the future. The second question was, can you repeat, please?
Sure. The second question was, in general, around how Pfizer ensures the quality of products.
Yeah, I think we didn't cut corners on the COVID vaccine, and probably if you have a knowledge about the pharmaceutical industry, or at least Pfizer for sure, we have a bunch of analytical tests that we need to have before we release any vaccine. That's one point. A second piece is it has to produce in a GMP environment in a way that the way we produce, not only the final release tests that we run through, but the way we produce also is with a lot of quality requirements associated to that. If the question was specific to COVID vaccine would not be treated any different than any Pfizer drugs we have for sale. Everything has a very stringent quality release, and integrity is one of the values of the company, and I think being with Pfizer for so many years, I think the biggest driver for quality is actually the quality mindset and the integrity of everybody that works for Pfizer. Then it has ways to check it, but also has to do with the people, and the people are very integral and deliver products with quality.
Thank you. I want to move to a slightly different topic, more on the outreach side. There was a question from JR wondering if there are programs at Pfizer that encourage high school students to pursue careers in bioengineering, chemical engineering, control systems, the various technical functions. And so what does that look like with Pfizer in order for us to continue to positively impact the communities and the ability for people in those communities where Pfizer works to potentially become Pfizer employees?
Yeah, absolutely, Arthur. I can take that. We have several programs at many of our different sites that reach out to high school students. I mentioned earlier in New Jersey, New York, and in Connecticut, Groton, we bring in students from high schools and even as early as middle schools for a day at Pfizer to learn more about STEM. And so we take them around to the different stations, our labs, engage with different leaders, and to really change their mindsets about what a career in STEM looks like. And like Rocky Mount site, they're doing a lot of engagement with their high school students. In our digital program, we actually hire high school students and begin developing the pipeline as early as high school. And so we have a variety of programs for engagement at that level across our organization. So on our Pfizer site, our Pfizer career site, you can learn more about that.
Mona, I would add that we have a colleague, Ebony Arrington, who is on the WebEx, and Sanford site also provides opportunities for high school students.
Nice. Yes, Ebony, thank you for joining.
I have an additional question. This is from Dr. Theodore Nicholson, and it's related to kind of engagement in attacking disparities. there are a couple of parts, so I'll add these in together. So can you speak more to what Pfizer's doing with local governments to encourage development of healthcare facilities, clinical facilities in the communities that historically have not had access to care options in their neighborhoods? And also, as you talk about these efforts, can you speak perhaps to the portion of the Pfizer budget dedicated to improving relationships in underrepresented communities?
I'll take that question, Arthur. So in regards to what we're doing with local governments to increase healthcare facilities, we aren't building the healthcare facilities. That's not what our focus hasn't been on that. Our focus has been on for those healthcare facilities that are in place in the communities, especially community health systems, federally qualified health systems. We are providing our medications to those FQHCs for free, so that the people that those community health centers are serving are able to give our medications to that population without any charge. So that's been a big focus of ours, and it's through our Pfizer, our RX Pathways program that we do that. In addition, you asked what else are we doing in terms of outreach? I think that was the question. So the Multicultural Center of Excellence has a budget, and we work with over 40 multicultural organizations and counting to partner with them on initiatives that are important to them and important to Pfizer around healthcare disparities. So if you're interested in sharing or wanting to partner, please feel free to outreach to me. My email address, we can put that back up, or Naisha Foster through the Multicultural Center of Excellence. In addition to that, you heard that Mona talked about the COVID-19 grants that we've done. We are looking at doing some social justice grants, so more to come, but we are very interested in being in the communities and look forward to hearing your thoughts on how we can be better partners.
I'm gonna jump in with a follow-up question through the lens of the Healthcare Innovation SIG, as I'm seeing some other questions come in that I think are getting to this point. So are there grants still available for 2020? As it, so kind of insights to get into.
So what we do is we like to get to know the organization. Our 2020 grants have been expended, but Arthur, know that if your organization is interested in partnering with us, we want to go ahead and start those discussions, because typically what we do is we look in around the November timeframe for grants for the following year. So that's just a couple of months off. But also know that as we try to educate the community in regards to diversity in clinical trials, that there are some opportunities in 2020 to do that. So would love to talk to you more offline, but yes, in terms of 2020, there's some opportunities around vaccines, vaccine hesitancy, and diversity in clinical trials.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I'm sure there are a number of folks on the call who'd be interested in learning how they could take individual action or support the organization. Awesome.
Thank you.
Moving back to a question that's come in around kind of outreach, but also related to the vaccine development. This is from Busola. What are the best words to say or the best way to educate people who believe that the current accelerated vaccine development efforts means that proper safety measures might not be taken during the development or in clinical trials? As we go away from this talk, how do we be that advocate, but also that sounding board?
Can you rephrase the question, Arthur? I'm sorry, I was typing in the RX Pathways information into the chat.
So as an individual might be thinking about informing their friends or family about the accelerated vaccine development, what are the best words that they should say or the best ways to educate those individuals?
So we have information and in regards to the COVID-19 trial, and I'll put it in the chat. I'll put the link to that information because, of course, we want you to be prepared with the facts to share with your friends and family. But the first thing to me is just being educated about the clinical trial process. So I will add some links into the chat so that the people who are on the call have that information. And again, always feel free to outreach to me.
Yeah, I want to make a comment on that question. I think I heard that question before. Paul said, and many times, that we're not cutting corners or what it takes to develop the vaccine, and we're doing things in parallel to speed up the process. We're not cutting corners. We're going to the regular process to developing this vaccine. That's very important. The second piece that I think, and again, Paul mentioned and everybody mentioned, we all need this vaccine. My family needs this vaccine, and I want a vaccine with quality as well. Then I think what you should mention is that has probably in Pfizer, give or take, 2,000 people working for the success of this vaccine who wants that vaccine for their families as well. And we're going to ensure, not only because of us, but because the social responsibility that we all feel about this, that will be with good quality. Then I think you have a technical answer to that, but you have also a moral integrity answer to that as well. Just I want to mention that.
Yeah, if I may also add, my boss has actually signed up for the clinical trials in Chesterfield. So she's not the right candidate because she's trying to protect herself from getting the vaccine. But I should say that we just provide the clinical data. We don't make the decision on the approval. That's done by the regulators, the FDA and other regulators at site. And so they have to make sure, and they've come up with clear guidelines on what it will take to get approval. And so that's, those are already established, and we have to kind of go through that. So we are trying to, use the highest standards because our reputation is on the line, right? If we make something that's not, our reputation is on the line. And so, we are trying to get the best data possible, and the regulators make the call. Finally, Pfizer publishes all the data. In fact, yesterday, if you guys know, there's a publication out about our lead candidate and the clinical results from that, and it has some of the safety and efficacy data. So almost every couple of weeks, our data is basically published for people to see it. And there's some pretty good reviews. I was just reading one not too long ago on the data that we published yesterday.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did attach some information into the chat, Arthur.
Oh, yes, I see. So anyone looking in the chat, you can see a community partner background document. Feel free to access that and keep it close. A question related to, I would say, careers and employee experience at Pfizer. Does Pfizer have a mentorship program to support young professionals? This is a question from Sheila, who's on the chat. And maybe adding a little bit to that question, does Pfizer have a mentorship program to support young professionals? Can anyone on the call maybe talk about someone that they've mentored, during their career at Pfizer as an example?
Absolutely. So I can start with the different programs. So as I mentioned with the CRGs, the colleague resource groups, every colleague resource group has a mentoring program in addition to the businesses offering a mentoring program. And on top of that, the enterprise offering a mentor program. So there are formal mentoring partnerships, there are informal mentoring partnerships, and we also mentor externally. So we partner with Girls Who Code, in New York City, and we host these girls throughout the entire summer, and they're typically in high school. So myself, I do mentor several young professionals now that they're in college. They were in high school earlier, and so I make sure to provide that mentorship, provide that guidance, and help them find a position in Pfizer when they're ready. So that mentorship goes with purpose to finding a career at Pfizer. Anyone else want to share a little bit about their mentoring journey?
Certainly. I actually mentor people in my church. Frankly, I consider myself to be a mentor and a mentee, especially for people of color. I work with a number of my colleagues at Pfizer. So I actually believe that everyone should be a mentor and a mentee, frankly, because all the experiences that we have as people of color are beneficial to help navigate the corporate setting, frankly. And there is navigation that must take place. And so if any one of you are interested in talking to me offline, feel free to outreach to me. I'd be happy to talk to you about, again, my journey at Pfizer and my professional journey.
Roberto is much older than me, and he has been a mentor of mine for a long time. So he's mentored me at this thing. So that's a good example of that. In fact, the Global Black Council just started their new mentoring program for this year, this week, and I actually started my first mentoring program with someone who is in sales yesterday. So it's an active program. They do a really good job of matching, and you have someone in sales being matched with someone in research, and you know, we are getting to learn from each other. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, I mentor several people within Pfizer, and basically in the Latino community piece, actually, probably, I mean, since many years I've been involved, probably more than 20 people I mentored during that time. I think the benefit of mentoring somebody from the Latino community for me is that we speak sometimes similar language. People feel a bit more free to talk and familiar to what we're saying, and plus they understand my accent, which is important as well. Then, yeah, we do have a lot of that. Basically, a lot of mentorship. How you should look at your career, how you should be trying to see what you want to do, define very clearly what you want to do, and then find the right ways to sponsor them, to connect to people, try to understand different jobs at Pfizer. Then I think has been successful. I follow some of them, and some of them got other jobs and move on into their career. Others actually, some few move out of Pfizer and found that they could progress someplace else. And some of them did both, move out and came back. It's a mentorship is in my view, is more of a personal mentorship, but not to find jobs in Pfizer for people or ways to grow, but to mentor how they treat their career in the future.
Thanks for sharing that. We know how valuable mentorship is for both personal and professional development, but in general, career success. There are so many questions still coming in, but I do want to allow us to close on time so that you can continue to enjoy the other programming. So I'm going to make that one the last question, and we'll share just a couple of closing remarks. The first one, Jill, just note there is a link for a survey on this session in the chat, so you can click that. It's only a few questions. We'll just take 1 minute, and we will give you some news about what you can look forward to for the rest of the conference. Oops. 1 sec. There we go. So a couple of SIG programs that you can look forward to attending. We have a speed networking reception this evening in partnership with the Process Improvement Special Interest Group. That's from 2 to 4 p.m. Central. So check that and mark it on your conference program agenda. And then we have 2 programs on Saturday. One is about the healthcare industry and academia research collaborations. That's in partnership with the Biomedical Engineering Society. And finally, we have a spin on healthcare looking at drones in healthcare and how Zipline is delivering medical supplies and medicines to individuals who need them in remote communities. And of course, we want to thank Pfizer and give Mona or a member of the team the opportunity to tell you how you can continue to stay engaged.
Thank you, Arthur, and thank you all of you for attending this session, learning more about Pfizer, our clinical studies, our D&I journey, our COVID-19 response. To learn more, we are all over social media. We're very engaged externally. Visit us on Pfizer Careers, but most importantly, visit our booth today. So we have about 15 members of our team ready to take your questions. We have over 100 positions available. So come be a part of a company that delivers breakthroughs that changes patients' lives. Thank you, Arthur.
Awesome. We thank you all for joining the program. Please do stop by and connect with Pfizer. Sorry that we couldn't get to everyone's question, but we are copying them and we'll prepare some responses and send in follow-on communications. So please do make sure you are completing the survey link so that we can stay in touch. We'll also be reaching out regarding the winners from the leadership board. And there are over 100 opportunities at Pfizer. You can see a spreadsheet showing some of the SIG hot jobs that we're highlighting on behalf of Pfizer. Thank you so much for attending the presentation and our workshop. Enjoy the conference and answer the 1-question survey you'll see pop up in a moment. Can everyone say goodbye to the audience here?
Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great conference.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks.
Mhm.